guys, it's Tiffany with Spot on Spirit, psychic, Reiki master, and spirit medium. Thank you for tuning in to this truly insightful video. Keep it rockin' because Todd Gorney of KTBG Radio will be giving us a brief overview of this zodiac sign. Don't go anywhere because John Divon, aka The Foundation, aka my boyfriend, will be reading an in-depth synopsis of my favorite sign from Linda Goodman's Sun Sign Astrology book. Remember, be original and be you. Be boo bapu.
Aquarius, the water bearer. January 21st through February 19th. How to recognize Aquarius. Lots of people like rainbows. Children make wishes on them. Artists paint them. Dreamers chase them. But the Aquarian is ahead of everybody. He lives on one. What's more, he's taken it apart and examined it piece by piece, color by color, and he still believes in it. It isn't easy to believe in something after you know what it's really like. But the Aquarian is essentially a realist, even though his address is tomorrow with a wild-blue-yonder zip code, like the bewildered Alice taken through the maze of Wonderland by Aquarian Lewis Carroll. You'll have to be constantly prepared for the unexpected with Uranians. Generally, kindly, and tranquil by nature, Aquarians nevertheless enjoy defying public opinion, and they secretly delight in shocking more conventional people with occasional erratic conduct. These normally soft-spoken and courteous souls can suddenly short-circuit you with the most amazing statements and actions at the most unpredictable times. The typical Uranian is half Albert Schweitzer and half Mickey Mouse. His feet can be wearing sandals, boots, Oxfords, or hush puppies, and he'll seldom bother to check whether they're appropriate for the occasion. He'll show up barefoot if he feels like it, and laugh at you for laughing at him. Aquarians often deliberately adopt weird attire to show their refusal to conform. You can often recognize people born under this fixed air sign by their frequent use of the word friend. Aquarian Franklin Roosevelt's fireside chats invariably began with, "My friends." And the typical Uranus question after a broken romance is, "Can't we still be friends?" Aquarius is neither jaded nor naive, neither enthusiastic nor blase. Continuous experimentation simply leaves him curious to penetrate the next mystery. And the next mystery could be you. That person who seems to be either a million miles away mentally or else dissecting you under an invisible microscope is probably an Aquarian. It can be disconcerting to discover, after all his intense flattering curiosity, that he's just as deeply interested in the personal lives of the corner policeman, the bartender, the bellboy, the nightclub singer, or the inmates of the funny house as he is in yours. Politics fascinate him, sports absorb him, and children intrigue him. But then, so do horses, automobiles, elderly people, medical discoveries, authors, astronauts, alcoholics, pianos, pinwheels, and prayers. Not to mention baseball and Louis Armstrong. Join the crowd and toss your ego in the wastebasket, or his coolly impersonal approach will be sure to bruise it. Look for a strange fairway. Look in the eyes as if they contain some kind of magic, mysterious knowledge you can't penetrate. Aquarius eyes are typically vague, with a dreamy, wandering expression, and often, but not always, blue, green, or gray. The hair is frequently straight and silky, likely to be blonde, sandy, or light brown. The complexion is pale, and the height is usually taller than average, though the ascendant can modify the appearance of any sun sign. You'll notice a marked nobility of profile. Uranus features are finely chiseled, suggestive of Roman emperors, cut on old gold coins. True Aquarians will often adopt the pose of the drooping head when they're thinking about a problem, or just after they've asked a question. The head drops abruptly forward, or cocks to one side, waiting for your reaction. Curiously, thanks to the dual sexuality of Uranus, there are often feminine characteristics in the male bodies, such as broad hips, for example, and masculine characteristics in the female body, such as broad shoulders. Freedom-loving Uranians can be actually funny, perverse, original, conceited, and independent. But they can also be diplomatic, gentle, sympathetic, and timid. The Aquarian will almost desperately seek the security of crowds and saturate himself with friendship. Then he'll fall into a gloomy, morose spell of loneliness and want to be strictly left alone. But whether he's mingling or singling, he'll retain his sharp perception, which is at once both deeper and quicker than others. Uranus makes him a natural rebel who instinctively feels that all old customs are wrong, and that drastic alteration and revolutionary change is what the world and people need. To this end, Aquarians are always analyzing situations, friends, and strangers. It can be disturbing when they start asking point-blank questions with a bare minimum of tact as they probe into the heart of your private feelings. When they discover the puzzle wasn't so complex after all, they become bored, sometimes even upset. Nothing is more insulting than to have a Aquarian tire of his game of microscopic examination and turn to the next interesting person, just when he's convinced he thinks you are the most important human being on earth. It stings. Despite their fixation on friendship, Aquarians don't have many intimates. They seek quantity rather than quality in their associations, and they seldom settle down to a steady relationship for more than a limited period. There's too much to discover around the next corner to remain tied to one or two friendships exclusively. It does little good to make an emotional appeal to such an impersonal nature. But if you touch the heart of an Aquarian, he'll usually get off his bicycle and come back to see what he might have missed. A peculiar sort of isolation hangs over the Uranian, and he's often misunderstood by mankind. That's because mankind hasn't yet caught up with the Aquarian utopia, since the water bearer lives in the future. Coming back only briefly to the present, he can seem just plain pixelated to more mundane souls. He senses this, and it deepens his sense of isolation. But just because others can't keep up with him is no reason, in his opinion, to go backwards. So he wanders among his lonely clouds, while we mere mortals wonder what he's doing way out there. Astrology teaches us that as the Aquarian thinks, so will the world think in 50 years. That may be true, but it certainly doesn't narrow the gap between the Uranus ruled and the rest of us today. The sun sign is known as the sign of genius. And so it is. Since over 70% of the people in the Hall of Fame are either sun sign Aquarians or have Aquarian ascendants. On the other hand, a substantially high percentage of those confined in mental institutions or who drop in for regular couch sessions with an analyst are also Aquarians. There's a fine line, they say, between genius and insanity, and your Uranian friends can sometimes make you wonder which side of the line they're on. A great deal of the confusion is due to man's tendency to belittle his prophets. The familiar quotes that they laughed at Fulton and his steamboat, they thought Edison was mentally retarded, and they wanted to lock up Louis Pasteur, are examples of the attitude of the materialistic world toward those whose senses are tuned to higher spheres of thought. Uranians are a curious mixture of cold, practicality, and eccentric instability, and they seem to have an instinctive empathy with the mentally disturbed. It's a curious fact that almost any Aquarian can substantially reduce the anxiety of the insane simply by talking to them quietly. He has a marvelous knack for calming hysterical people and soothing frightened children. It is because of his own thinly covered, highly acute nervous system that he has such deep understanding. The Aquarian outlook is so broad that you'll seldom find one who is prejudiced, unless there are severe planetary influences in the natal chart. Even then, he'll be deeply shocked when his prejudice is pointed out. The brotherhood instinct is so strong in him that when a rare Aquarian is guilty of being intolerant, he's not only unaware of it, he hates the label. Ordinarily, everyone is his brother or sister. He'll wander through affluent society and the slums alike with his symbolic jar, gathering the waters of knowledge and pouring them out again, except for those occasional lapses into hibernation. But his hiding out periods seldom last long, and before you get a chance to miss, the uranium is back gregariously making the rounds again. Don't try to interrupt his solitude. When he wants to be alone, he wants to be alone. But he hasn't retired from the mainstream permanently, even if he does take a sudden Uranus notion to get an unlisted phone number. His address hasn't changed, and neither has he. He can never renounce people for long. Ignore him, and he'll soon be walking around town on those homemade stilts, as alert and as inquisitive as ever. Ordinarily, it's difficult to get an Aquarian to make a precise appointment. He'd rather keep it loose because he doesn't like to be pinned down to specific duties or obligations at specific times. He prefers a casual, "I'll see you around, maybe sometime Tuesday," to a definite hour for a meeting. However, I will say that once you've succeeded in nailing him and he gives you his word he'll meet you at a particular hour, he will be there on the dot. You can count on it. Even set your watch by his punctuality, and you better not be late yourself. He'll show up dependably, unless he's been kidnapped on the way. You can expect him to give his opinion frankly, but he won't try to dictate how you should think or how you should live your life. Conversely, he doesn't intend to let you tell him how he should think or live his. Unlike Aries and Leo or Gemini, he has no desire to hard sell his ideas to others. The Aquarian philosophy is that everyone has his thing, his special yearning. Each person dances to his own fiddle music, and individuality should be respected. It's interesting to see that as the world moves into the Aquarian age, the heralds of the new era are the flower people and the gurus. In exaggerated fashion, they are simply reflecting the Aquarian ideals: equality, brotherhood, love for all, live and let live, seek the truth, experiment, and retire to meditate. You'll rarely find the Aquarian fighting fiercely for a cause. They live their code and feel that's enough. Let Aries, Scorpio, Leo, and Sagittarius grab the sword and battle gloriously to free the downtrodden. The Uranus-ruled souls are too busy figuring out the reason for the revolution, listening to people's troubles and sharing sympathetic understanding. Aquarius believes in violent change, but he leaves the violence to others. He's not a moral or a physical coward. He just isn't geared for battle. When fight catches him unaware, he may strike out blindly in confusion, or he may simply agree to end the argument. His reaction is unpredictable, but one thing is certain. The next day his opinion will be as fixed as it was before. Anyone skilled in debate can usually get the best of him, since his attention can go so easily wander to the abstract in a battle of wits. The Aquarian fights best with his hat. He puts it on and leaves. His truth-respecting mind, however, won't budge an inch when he has a firm conviction, despite his distaste for unpleasant confrontations. All the shouting and emotional pressure in the world won't keep him from determinedly going his own way with his independent ideas, while the fireworks explode all around him. Our two Aquarian presidents, Abraham Lincoln and Franklin Roosevelt, demonstrate this principle perfectly. The concepts were equally original and strikingly unpopular in both cases. There was no aggressive insistence on personal theories, yet the sweeping reforms were made, regardless of lack of cooperation and bitter opposition.
Hey, what's up, everyone? It's Jay Fratt of the Conservative Hippie Podcast. I just wanted to give you a quick breather. While in just a moment, we're going to get you back to the smooth audio recording from Divon reading about the best zodiac sign of the bunch, your zodiac sign, from Linda Goodman's Sun Sign Astrology book. It's crazy to find all these unique areas that relate to you and your sun sign. Please take a moment when you finish listening to leave a comment with a few traits you identify with your zodiac sign. And if you like what you're hearing, subscribe, like, and share. John Divon has also been featured reading some of the zodiac signs for Stoner Horoscopes at stonerhoroscopes.com. They're uploaded at the beginning of each month for all 12 of the zodiac signs. And yep, they even make it into a podcast, available on iTunes and Google Play. I would like to take a moment to thank him for his friendship and time that he invests to share all the rich goodness with you fine people. I would also like to thank him for joining me on the Conservative Hippie Podcast. John has been a guest twice on the Conservative Hippie Podcast. You can find those episodes on iTunes, Google Play, and at theconservativehippie.com. Well, thanks again for listening, and I hope to see or hear from you. I want to finish my brief intermission with a shout out to Todd Gorney of KTBG Radio, Tiffany the Reiki Master Psychic Medium found at Spot On Spirit, and the one and only Adora Zen, writer of Stoner Horoscopes, found on Twitter at Adora Zen. Always remember to be original, be you, be boo bop boo. And now back to your listening pleasure. Enjoy.
Another reason why Uranians often meet with hostile criticism is that they're so full of surprises. They can lead you west, then suddenly turn and march east without warning. Aquarius has an obstinate way of not letting you know what he's up to. For weeks, the February-born father of a friend of mine ignored his wife's complaints about a stove that didn't work. He buried himself in his newspaper, oblivious to her desperate hints. Suddenly, one day, a truck pulled up. 2 men unloaded a brand new stove and connected it in the kitchen under the surprised eyes of his wife, who should have learned to expect such behavior. Trusting people doesn't come naturally to the Aquarian until he's scrutinized your motives, even your soul. If possible, it's easy to grow restive under his intent analysis of your every word and gesture. You get the feeling if it's all being filed away in that penetrating mind for future reference. And it is. He may seem to be in a dreamy fog now and then, but don't you believe it. He can probably tell you how many eyelashes you have. Never expect the Uranian to take you at face value. His innate curiosity will never keep him from shining the Uranus spotlight on you from head to toe. He wants to know what's behind the face, and he'll ask some mighty embarrassing questions to find out. But it's comforting to know that once you're accepted, he'll be loyal, and his friendship will be unshaken by malicious gossip. If you're his real friend, he won't believe the nasty whispers of your enemies, although he'll undoubtedly listen to them out of the sheer curiosity. Rest assured, however, that he'll make up his own mind in the final analysis. Uranus illnesses are usually connected with the circulatory system. Aquarians shiver and shake in the water, winter, and suffer with the humidity in the summer. They're susceptible to varicose veins and hardening of the arteries in old age, and their emotions are directed into negative channels. And they tend to have accidents to the legs, especially the shin and ankles. The ankle bones are often weak, and there may be pains in the legs due to poor circulation. frequent sore throats, and sometimes heart palpitation, usually not serious unless there are severe afflictions in the natal chart. Uranians need lots of fresh air, sleep, and exercise, but they seldom take advantage of these remedies. They don't get much fresh air because they close their windows, pile on the blankets, and still complain that they're freezing. The high-frequency, nervous tension that accompanies Uranus mental activity keeps them from getting enough sleep, and often the rest they do get is troubled by strange dreams. As for exercise, unless the Aquarian developed an early love of sports by playing stickball in his neighborhood, it's difficult to prod him into moving fast, let alone running around the track. His mind gets a continual workout, but the body needs a strong push. Aquarian health is usually excellent in childhood, bearing weird. Uranian complaints impossible to diagnose. The real troubles don't begin until maturity increases stubbornness. These people are extremely susceptible to hypnosis. Intuitively, lots of them sense this and won't expose themselves to it for love nor money. But this is a mistake because hypnotic suggestion from a good medical hypnosis could successfully remove their myriad phobias. They're acutely responsive to electrical treatment, too, which can be just as beneficial. Aquarians don't have the best memories in the world, but then they really don't need to memorize much, since they seem to pick up knowledge out of thin air, with some kind of invisible antenna. Why should they clutter their minds with information they may never need, when they can reach out by osmosis and grasp just about anything they want? They're likely to come home from the store without the most important item on the grocery list, because they can't be bothered with remembering what is, to them, non-essential. The typical Aquarian is the embodiment of the legendary absent-minded professor. I know one who planned to meet his wife in front of the city Squire Motel at noon, but he arrived early and ran into an old friend. The Uranian was engrossed in conversation with his pal when his wife approached, all smiles, and she came closer. He stared at her blankly, gallantly tipped his hat, then took his friend's arm and walked down the street, deep in conversation, leaving the furious, frustrated woman standing on the corner, alone and forgotten. The Uranus power of concentration can be awesome. Yet, they're also able to pick up things going on around and behind them when they choose. Like a radar screen, they can carry on a complicated discussion and still not miss an inflection of what's happening in the other part of the room. If they decide to tune in, sometimes you could swear the Aquarian paid no attention to anything you said, but the next day he'll repeat it back to you like a tape recorder. Never underestimate the Uranian process of soaking up knowledge while they seem to be oblivious, even though now and then they get lost in concentration, like my friend who left his wife standing on the street in a mood to kill. What the Aquarius man or woman thinks is always a clue to tomorrow. The uncanny Uranus ability to plunge into the unknown and absorb mystical secrets without half trying leads to a peculiar sort of intuition which gives them a high degree of psychic recognition. I know one who's literally answers the phone before it rings. And what's more, he knows who's on the other end before a word is spoken. Abraham Lincoln had several premonitions of his own death in startling detail. Almost every Aquarian has a unique kind of sensitivity that leads him that lets him know your inner desires. Without talk, he understands a need buried so deep that you're almost unaware of it yourself. Using that magical osmosis, the Aquarian can transmit his own thoughts with an unseen charge of electrical current. Even when his back is turned, he can project strong feelings by this strange process. During a long silence on the telephone, he may be sending and receiving vibrations when you think he's fallen asleep. Some Uranians don't need Western Union to send a telegram. Yet there's nothing superstitious about their thinking. A true scientist, even if he's a mechanic or a musician, the Uranians won't jump to a conclusion until it's passed the test of his keen mind. However, once he forms an opinion, it remains firmly fixed in his brain, and I do mean firmly. As strongly as he loves change in society and government, he won't change his own idea one iota for anybody. He's completely open-minded about world progress, but his mind clamps shut when it involves his personal behavior, which can be unexpectedly conservative. You can see that his liberalism has its boundaries. Aquarians despise lying and cheating, and they avoid borrowing and lending. They'll give you money as a gift, but don't ask them for a loan. Did you ever try to touch Aquarian Jack Benny for the Fast 50? Jack may surprise you by saying yes, but be sure you pay him back promptly. A broken promise or bad debt can put a wide crack in your friendship. Aquarians keep their word and pay their bills, and they expect others to do the same. Charge accounts don't normally excite them, and credit cards can frighten them. All this love of honesty, however, can sometimes be distorted into questionable behavior. As much as he hates hypocrisy and double-dealing, the Aquarian can somehow answer questions so cleverly that he gives a false impression. Yet he'll be outspokenly indignant if he catches anyone else guilty of such a delicate nuance of deception. He'll seldom tell an outright lie, but he can fool you in very subtle ways, which is hardly the essence of the honesty he so constantly preaches. His unrelenting search for truth and the desire to hide his own motives are incompatible traits, and the Aquarian must eventually face this inconsistency if he's going to learn the real truth about himself. Aquarians get credit for being idealists, perhaps too much credit, for true idealism consists of blind faith and optimism, and the Uranian is too shrewd to fool himself with lost causes for long. He knows that most dreams are illusions, like the rainbow he has examined so closely and still loves. Tradition and authority leave him unimpressed. He'll politely respect them, but they won't stop his compulsive drive to uncover fallacies, distortions, and illogical assumptions. His mind and body must both be as free as the wind. To try to pin down the Aquarian is to try to stabilize the butterfly, to stuff a spring breeze into a closet, or confine a winter gale in a bottle. It can't be done. And besides, who in the world would want to try? Though he's so far ahead of his time that you have trouble catching his viewpoint immediately, it's still worthwhile to make the attempt. You'll always come away a little wiser, if a little bewildered. His astrological flower is the daffodil. And now you know the derivation of the word daffy. The soul of the water bearer is constantly torn asunder by Uranus, the unpredictable and violent planet of change, which lets him see ahead with electric blue clarity to the future. Aquarius belongs to mankind. He represents its truest hopes and its deepest ideals. Even his mental uranium is not really a metal, but a radioactive, metallic chemical found only in combinations. It's important in atomic research, and it can undergo continuous fusion. The magnetic majesty of 8 bolts of brilliant lightning reflected in the Aquarian sapphire can split open his secrets for those who seek to know him. But only for an instant can you see into his lonely heart, long ago infused with Saturn's ancient wisdom, unless you too live in tomorrow.